This morning we have a youth rifle, a Winchester model 422. This one I actually bought for my grandson, who's 7 years old, or just turned 8 rather. And a lot of people ask me when they find out that I'm an air gun nut, they say, well, you know, what's a good model for a younger person to get them started? And so I may be doing a series here, a few videos on some different youth rifles. And I'm starting with this one because it's one of my favorites, and you can still pick these up from time to time. It's only 36 inches long, so it's fairly short. It's light, it's easy to cock, it's low power. They can still get into trouble with it, but in general it's just a really good starter rifle. And the thing about these is that they're pretty accurate too, with the right pellet. This is of course in 177. Now they made this, this one's made by Diana, and it was just rebranded as a Winchester. And this was the Diana 22, and they also brought it in to the United States as a high score 806. So there's different models. These old Dianas generally have a date stamp here somewhere near where the metal meets the stock. Let's see if we can get that here. This particular one, I don't know if you can see it. We'll take another look at that in a few minutes after we get the stock off. But this one says 1171, and so we know it was made in November of 1971. Now let's go ahead and pull the stock off and take a look at this a little closer at it. There's just the two screws here in the front. One on each side. And then the one in the trigger guard. It's just the front of the trigger guard. The rear one just goes into the wood. And the stock just lifts off. And here we have it. Let's see if I can get this. I mentioned the date stamp. Let's take a quick look at that. We can. And there it is right there. You see it says 1171. So that's the date, made in Germany by Diana. Now the rest of this rifle comes apart pretty easily too, and that's another thing I like about these, is they're really easy for the home guy to work on because they're so simple. These have leather seals in them, so they are a little different than the synthetic seals we see in modern guns. But okay, let's pull this apart real quick, see what we've got. The end cap, of course, comes off, and then we've got two pins here. The front pin is for the trigger, holds the trigger in place. And notice again that there's no safety here. So this again, if that's an issue for you, this may not be a good gun for you, but I think it's a good thing because it can help train the child to think about safety as an issue. Safety in the sense of how you treat the gun rather than relying on a mechanical device. This pin is a little bit smaller than the rear pin, and it can just be driven out like so. And there's the rear or the front pin for the trigger. There is a spring in here, so it just comes out. Make sure. There's the spring. There's no adjustment on this trigger whatsoever. I suppose you could put a different spring, but you still have to have enough spring to engage the trigger mechanism. And that's all it is. It's right there. You can see it's a fairly basic, excuse me, very basic trigger here. It has these spacers, which I'm not sure what the thinking is there, but there's a little bit of motion here. which gives it kind of a feel, I guess, of being adjustable or having different stages. We're just going to set this aside for now. And really nothing can be done to it other than just cleaning it up. And that leaves the receiver with the this part of the gun here, the barrel and caulking mechanism. What we're going to do, we're not going to use a spring compressor on this because the spring in here is really light. It's fairly small. There's not a lot of tension there. And so we're going to see if we can't just drive this pin out. Well, next we're going to take this rear pin out, and it's under spring tension from the spring in here, but it's not a big spring, it's not heavy, it's not got a lot of preload on it. And so what we're going to do is what I call the gut method, and you take the barrel and stick it up against something you've got clamped on the bench, take a block of wood and put it up here against your gut. I mean, you might even be able to do this with your thumb, and then we'll drive this pin out of here. And there's the pin. Once you get the pin out from this rear hole, and that fits into this part here in the back, you pull out the, I don't know what you'd call this part here, but the trigger spring goes here and the trigger unit in here, and that just comes right out as well. And then we get into the spring and the spring guide here. And that's what you call a kinked spring, and it's probably been in there since 1971, and it's taken a set over time. So we're going to replace that spring actually with the one from Air Rifle Headquarters. And then this is the spring guide here, and I'm debating whether I should make a custom spring guide just to smooth out the, it's got some play in it here. It's got some wobble. If you make the spring guide so it fits tight to the spring, that takes some of the vibration out of the action. So there's that. Now what we have left is the piston is still in there, and all the caulking stuff here, the caulking lever and whatnot. So we're going to pull off the locking nut. Actually, I broke the barrel here, and we're going to take off the locking nut. By breaking the barrel, you take that little bit of detent pressure off, and there's the locking nut. And from the other side, it's actually a threaded lug here. And there's the pin that holds the barrel onto the forks there. And of course the barrel comes off. So once we get the barrel off, there's two spacers. There's one here on this side. Get that out. Just like a little washer, very thin, and also on the other side. Take those out, set them aside, and now we can get the caulking lever. Just lifts out of the hole right here, and inside of that is the piston. So we're going to set that aside for now. And the piston should come out now. There it is. And there's the piston there. This has got a latch here, and after all of these years, it's a good idea to take a look and make sure that that's in safe condition, that it's not too rounded. You can see that this is a leather piston, and I've already done it because I've been through this gun once checking it out, but there's a screw here on the end, and that screw goes into the body of the piston and holds the leather seal on. Well, there's a pin. They drill a hole through the piston here. You can see that hole into the screw, and then put a pin in there, and that pins that screw into place and keeps it from backing out. Well, in order to get this off, you have to drill that pin out. And once you drill that pin out, then you can unscrew the screw on the end. Normally, there it is. And you can just unscrew that. So if you do run into one of these, make sure you remember about that pin into the screw. I'll go ahead and take this leather seal off. We're going to replace this seal. It's pretty well had it. And you can see there's a, get that in the picture here, there's a hole in the screw right here that, get that to focus. Yeah, there's a hole, that little screw has been drilled and pinned. So we've taken care of that. We're going to have to replace that with a new screw. There's a couple parts to this. Nothing on the end here of the piston. But the seal itself has the screw, and then there's a plastic cap here that goes in. We're going to save that, and there's your seal right there. Underneath it is another plastic piece that forms the base of the seal. So that's what we've got, is those parts there. What we're going to replace is the screw, the seal, and this bottom one is broken, as you can see, so we're going to replace that as well. I wanted to mention that there's a breech seal in here on the receiver there, and that, I believe, is made of leather. We'll try and pull that out here if we can. And we'll be replacing that. It's gummed in there pretty good right now. Let's see, come on. I'm not sure what the material is, if it's an O-ring or leather. But I'm gonna have to dig that out. I can show it here. I'm gonna have to dig that out off camera and see what it is, and then see about replacing it. It fits right in there, and that of course seals the breech between the air coming out of the cylinder here into the barrel. And that's about it.